Hi everyone, welcome back to C programming tutorial series. In my last video I have completed the discussion on entry control loop and exit control loop. If you guys have not seen that video, then I just recommend you guys to watch that video as well. And in today's video I am going to discuss about Sentinel loops. So before coming to today's topic, I just want to tell you guys that if you guys like this video, click on like button, share it with your friends, don't forget to subscribe to this channel, and if you guys have any questions, then let me know in the comment section. Now let us start our today's discussion on Sentinel loops. So based on the nature of control variable and the kind of value assigned to it for testing the control expression, the loops may be classified into two general categories, and those two categories are counter control loops and sentinel control loops. So whenever we will be using loops, there will be three parts. First one is initialization, second one is condition, and then third one is increment or decrement. Okay, that second part, condition, is also called as control expression, because that condition only controls how many times that particular loop needs to execute. So now based on the type of that condition we used in the for loop, we divided the loops into two categories, which is counter control loops and sentinel control loops. So we'll see one by one each and every of these two loops with the help of an example. So now the first one is counter control loops. When we know in advance exactly how many times the loop will be executed, we use a counter control loop. So I'm sure you guys already know the structure of a for loop. So structure of a for loop includes three parts: initialization, condition, and then increment or decrement. Okay, so whenever we will be using for loop, according to the structure of the for loop, we will be knowing in advance that how many times that for loop will going to execute, or the instructions or the statements present under the for loop, we will be knowing that how many times those statements will going to execute, because in the condition of the for loop itself we will be mentioning that so and so times the instructions inside that particular for loop will going to execute with the help of the condition I is less than or equals to 10, or I is less than 5. If the I value is equals to 0 and the condition we will set as I is less than 5, that means 5 times that for loop will going to execute. Okay, so that for loop comes under the counter control loops. Next point is we use a counter controlled variable known as counter. So in the for loop we will be using a counter controlled variable which is known as counter, which will be keep on incrementing with each and every iteration of that for loop. Next is the counter must be initialized, tested, and updated properly for the desired loop operations. So in for loop we will be using a counter variable, and that counter variable will be initialized with some initial value, let us say 0 or 1, and that value then gets tested, and every time with each iteration that counter value will be keep on updating. Next is the number of times we want to execute the loop may be a constant or a variable that is assigned a value. Okay, so the number of times we want to execute that particular loop is constant, like 4 times, 5 times, or 10 times, or 15 times. Okay, next is a counter control loop is sometimes called definite repetition loop, because in counter control loop we will be knowing that how many times that particular loop will going to execute. That's why it is also called as definite repetition loop. Okay, now let us move ahead to discuss another type of sentinel loops, which is sentinel control loops. In a sentinel control loop, a special value called a sentinel value is used to change the loop control expression from true to false. Okay, so in the case of sentinel control loops, we won't be having any idea how many times the statement present under the loop are going to execute. Okay, so initially when the loop gets started, at the time the value of the control expression will be true, and as on the loop keeps on continue, once the value of the control expression becomes false, the loop gets terminated. Okay, the sentinel control variable is often called indefinite repetition loop because the number of repetition is not known before the loop begins executed. Okay, so this point is exactly the same what I have already told you. Since we won't be having any idea how many times the statement present under the loop are going to execute, so that's why this type of loops are also called as indefinite repetition loop. So as you can see here, I have written down the examples of both the types of loops, counter control loops and sentinel control loops. And in both of these examples, I am trying to make the addition of some set of numbers. Okay, in the left side example, I have used for loop, and on the right side example, I have used while loop. So let us discuss this example. So here I have declared few variables of type integer num, I and sum, and I have initialized a value of 0 to sum. Once this program gets executed, I will be displaying a message to the user, enter the limit, and then user will enter the value, and that value will be 4, 5, 6, 10, anything. Let us suppose user has entered the value of 5, then that value gets scanned and stored inside the variable num. Okay, I will start the for loop with the initial value of 1, and then I will check value of I, which is 1. 1 is less than or equals to 5. The value of num is 5 now. 1 is less than or equals to 5. Yes, condition true. Then control comes inside the for loop. Sum equals to sum plus I. Initial value of sum is 0. So sum equals to the value of sum is 0. 0 plus value of I is 1. So 0 plus 1, which equals to 1, and 1 gets assigned to sum. Now sum variable will have the value of 1. Like this, each and every iteration takes place. Then control will come to I plus plus. The value of I gets incremented by 1, and now the value of I becomes 2. Now for the value of I equals to 2, the condition gets checked. I value, which is 2. 2 is less than or equals to 5. Yes, condition true. Then control come inside this for loop and make the sum. Sum equals to sum value was 1. 1 plus I value is 2. 1 plus 2, which equals to 3, and 3 gets stored inside sum. Okay, and then I gets incremented by 1 and I becomes 3. Like this, with each and every iteration, the value of I gets updated and incremented by 1. And once the value of I becomes 5, for that value of 5, the condition will be checked again. 5 is less than or equals to 5. Yes, 5 is not less than 5, but 5 is equals to 5. This statement will execute and control come out from the for loop to print the value of sum. Okay, so since in this case I'm using for loop, so I know that 5 times the for loop will going to execute. 5 times this sum statement will going to execute. So before the program gets executed, I will be having an idea that this many number of times the for loop will going to execute. That's why it is called as counter control loop. So this I is a counter because I value will keep on incremented with each and every iteration. Now let us discuss another types of loops, which is sentinel control loops. Here also I am doing the same thing, that is adding some set of numbers. So I have declared few variables of type integer, sum equals to 0 and num. Once this program gets executed, the user will going to enter some list of numbers, and since in this case, in this example of sentinel control loops, I don't have any idea how many numbers user will going to enter. So but this while loop will get terminated only when the user enters 0, but I don't know after how many different numbers user will going to enter 0. That means I don't have any idea how many times the statements present under this while loop are going to execute. Okay, that is what sentinel controlled loops, where the programmer will not have any idea how many times the statements present under the while loop are going to execute. Okay, so once this condition becomes true, the loop gets terminated. Once the user enters 0, the loop gets terminated. Okay, so when this program gets executed, this message gets printed out where it asks the user to enter some list of numbers. Then this while loop gets started executing. Suppose user entered 5 different numbers, and after entering 5 different numbers, user will enter 0. The moment when user enters 0, the while loop gets terminated and we will get the sum. So this is what explanation on the counter control loops and Sentinel control loops. Okay, so I'm sure you guys have understood what are different types of Sentinel loops. So along with the help of an example, I have tried to explain you these two types of loops in detail. Okay, so I'm sure you guys have understood. If you guys like this video, click on like button, share it with your friends, don't forget to subscribe to this channel, and if you guys have any questions, then let me know in the comment section. And thanks for watching.